Hi, I'm Wes Allen with DM Tales, and today I am looking at the new edition of Pendragon from Chaosium. Let's roll it. I want to open with a short channel announcement. I have enabled channel memberships on DM Tales, so if you're able to help be a coffee contributor for a couple of bucks a month, I would be most appreciative. Right now, there's two benefits that come with being a member of DM Tales. First is to access the DM Tales Discord, which is a really nice, welcoming community. And then when I get a dozen members or so, I'm going to be doing some members-only live streams where I'll do AMAs or maybe a character build or two, or some other fun with which folks can interact. What I will not be doing is changing my regular videos to early access for members only. I just think that's a terrible thing to do to folks who may not be in a position to become a member or just don't have interest in doing that at all, but they've watched the channel for 3 years and I want to continue honoring that. So if you're able to do it, great, and if not, keep watching. I appreciate you very much. I'm really excited by this because Pendragon is my first Chaosium game ever. I've never read, played, or even looked at anything else. I know of them, but this is the first time I've had it in my hands. And so I would like to thank Chaosium for providing this copy of Pendragon for this review. I have received no other compensation except for the book in exchange for my free and fair thoughts. Let's take a look. In Pendragon, players take on the role of knights, or soon-to-be knights, in King Arthur's Britain. The book opens up with a 20-page essay on the in-game history. It provides social background for the Middle Ages and the nature of both knighthood and nobility. This fascinating chapter sets the tone for the game because in Pendragon, players are not throwing themselves into a faux medieval fantasy setting which shares a lot of our modern assumptions. Things like taverns having menus or inns having private rooms like a modern hotel, or social class not mattering all that much. Rather, they're playing in Arthur's Britain, a world in which concepts like social status and hierarchy were the assumed natural state of humanity. Characters, as was already stated, take on the role of knights or soon-to-be knighted squires, most of whom were bound to a liege lord who had significant sway over their lives, right up to who or even if they were allowed to get married. So while the society of Arthur's Britain was male-dominated, this opening chapter does point to the reality of women at arms appearing in Welsh Arthurian literature. Playing a female knight is well within the scope of the game, although the game does provide some different reflections that the people of that world might have had to a female knight, because in some places they might have been a little more common, at least enough that they weren't unusual, and in some places they might have gotten sideways glances. What Pendragon does, however, is point out that how the table handles gender roles inside their version of Arthurian Britain is up to the table. The goal is that everybody has fun. It's a really good way to open up. Pendragon is a roll-under system where characters roll against their own skills, although these values can be modified by in-game circumstances pre-roll. Each check has 4 possible outcomes: a critical success, a failure, and a fumble. And a success is triggered when a player rolls equal to or under the current value of their modified ability or skill for that check. And if the action has a significant impact on the story, then the GM may even allow the player to put an experience check next to that value that's used for advancement later on. But interestingly, a critical success, which gives added benefits the way it does in many other games, is not a matter of rolling a 1 as it works in a lot of other roll-under systems, such as Dragonbane. In Pendragon, a critical success is triggered when the player's roll matches the modified value of the skill being checked. So if a modified skill value ends up being 15, it's a 15 that triggers the critical success. A failure is triggered when a player rolls over their modified value, while a fumble is triggered when a player rolls a 20 for their check, much as it works in many other roll-under systems. The narrative impacts of fumbles and failures, they're totally left up to the GM. When there are opposed rolls in the game, both participants roll against their skill, and the winner is the highest number rolled, which is also a success. I think this is a really nice way to handle opposed roles because when a character with a skill of 10 is locked in opposition with a character who has a skill of 15, the less capable character can still succeed, but their margin for success is more narrow. It's a nice mechanical way to make the characters feel as though they breathe, they move, and that their skills actually have value beyond just the roll of the dice. It's really cool. And that's the basic mechanical setup for the game. There are some nuances to it, like modifiers called a critical bonus, which increases the range that players can use to get a critical success. But the game's mechanics are simple and they're elegant, and I like it a lot. Characters in Pendragon are complex. This is out of necessity because a character's complexity is how players meld them into the alien landscape of Arthur's Britain. But it can feel a little bit overwhelming. So there's three methods for character generation presented in the book. You can use pre-generated characters, which allows the player to jump right in and go. You have constructed characters, which works off of a point-buy system, and then random characters, which generate all sorts of off-the-wall personalities with a whole bunch of different rolling formulas. Characters have 5 characteristics: size, dexterity, strength, constitution, and appeal. 2 of these, size and appeal, have linked tables which players use to help flesh out their character. A character with a size of 10, for example, is only 5 foot 5 inches and weighs about 125 pounds. Characters with low appeal will have traits which have a negative impact on their social interactions. Pendragon recommends that new players especially be sure to have their size and appeal be at least a combined 21, because anything less might make the character a little bit more difficult to play. There are 8 derived characteristics in the game, which handle things like the character's major wound threshold and weapon damage, and they're built off the 5 base characteristics. Some of these, like knockdown and major wound threshold, are actually equal to the characteristic's current value, like constitution. Others, like weapon damage, are the result of a mathematical formula. A character's weapon damage is strength plus size divided by 6. Decimals are always rounded to the nearest whole number. In Pendragon, a character's personality is as important as their physical prowess, so the game also includes 13 opposed trait pairs. These traits, such as modest, proud, always have a combined value of 20. If a value in a trait is 0 to 4, the character is unsung in that trait. No one will expect them to exhibit that specific trait. If a character has a rank of 15 to 20, however, the character is known for that trait and will always default to it when a trait check is called for in an interaction. This design creates a lot of numbers that the players need to track because they're sitting there on the sheet. And yet, it also creates some cool design for social interactions in which these personality traits come into play, even altering the way denizens of the game perceive the character, which is pretty cool. Characters are further fleshed out with passions, which are beliefs that are categorized into 4 different courts and can provide a character a short-term bonus in different situations. Like other values in the game, passions range from 0 to 20, although a character needs to retain an honor passion of 5 in order to retain their status as a knight. And if a character has a value of 15 or greater in a passion, they are compelled to act upon it in any given situation. So what's on the sheet is going to affect roleplay. Now, there are also 30 skills in the game, a number of which are considered knightly skills. These specialized knightly skills must be at least 10 in their value before a character is able to attain knighthood. While a number of the skills begin with set values, many are based off of characteristics, either modified or divided in half. There is a lot to keep track of for a Pendragon character, and the character sheet reflects this. When a character is complete, though, the result is distinct. All of those numbers for characteristics and derived characteristics and traits and passions and skills, they create unique figures in the game world. So there's a lot to keep track of, but the results are pretty interesting. Combat in Pendragon is a 5-step simultaneous process. There's no initiative that's rolled. First, combatants declare their single combat action for the round. This is not limited to attacking, though. There's some alternative combat actions would allow for a character to trample an opponent with their horse. That sounds like fun. Or set a spear against a charge, or grapple an opponent in order to subdue them. The chosen combat action determines which skill or characteristic the player will use for an opposed roll during combat. A lot of combat is opposed rolls. Second, combat actions are resolved, and as I said, often with an opposed skill check. Third, the winner's outcome is resolved. Basically, damage is calculated. And fourth, the loser's outcome is resolved. Damage is taken. Checks for things like knockdown, they're rolled. Fifth, a character who didn't declare a combat action can then take their move action. And this is something that characters or players might have to get a little bit used to. Characters can only attack or move in a round unless they are doing a mounted charge on their horse, and these are knights. They're going to be mounted a lot of the time. Now, here's the thing. This works great if every combat is a one-on-one affair, and a lot of the way the game's designed is to set that up. These are honorable knights fighting each other. But what if the player is facing more than one character, or if there's multiple PCs are attacking the same opponent? Well, in that case, characters may still only oppose one of the adversaries in a combat round. That is, their combat action is only going to be taken against one particular opponent. Now, Pendragon provides an example of a knight fighting alone against a small group of bandits. He charges one as his combat action, and that makes his engagement with that adversary an opposed roll, which he resolves. But then the other two bandits get to attack the knight with no opposition whatsoever. They either hit or miss based on their modified rolls. So it's an interesting way of handling group combat without needing to roll for initiative or have multiple defense rolls. You're focusing on one target inside combat, and that's where your focus is, and that's the only opposition that you're going to be able to deal with. It's pretty cool. Damage is taken from a character's hit points, but Pendragon adds a layer to the concept which transcends the number itself. A character can either be healthy or debilitated. This status can be tied to a character's hit points because debilitated is triggered whenever a character hits 0 hit points and falls unconscious, but hitting 0 hit points is not the only way to get there. If a character takes enough damage that it exceeds their major wound threshold, they become debilitated and need to be cared for. And recovery in the game only occurs through natural healing, aided by the medieval practice of, it's what surgery becomes, but I'm not even going to type to pronounce it. The word is right there. I did look it up once, but it's really confusing. Essentially, this practice, which eventually becomes known as surgery, can stave off deterioration coming from a wound that results in a loss of maximum hit points. That's what deterioration is in the game. Characters who fall to 0 hit points or lower, they're going to die within a day unless they receive successful first aid through first aid on the field or this surgery thing that comes later. Combat reads like it would be fast at the table, and limiting characters to a single combat action per turn means there's not going to be a lot of thumb twiddling as combat goes on in between characters' turns. I also like the chess match that's triggered by the various actions combatants are able to choose from. This setup is new to me, but I find it intriguing. I like there's a strategy in not only what action you take, but who you apply it against. It's really cool. There is so much in this game that including it all would make this review well over an hour long, so I'm not even going to try. For example, advancement, it's handled during what's known as the winter phase. So in addition to a set amount of increases defined in-game, any skill, trait, or passion which has an experience check next to it is able to have an experience roll made for it. It's much like Dragonbane. If the D20 roll exceeds the current value, it is increased by 1. But personal advancement isn't even the start of the winter phase. During this part of play, characters are going to face a personal challenge. They'll have their glory calculated. That's their fame in the world. That's the goal of a knight. They're going to have to deal with family and financial realities, and they're also going to age. It is possible and even expected that characters in Pendragon, they're going to age out of play, passing on their legacy to their children, which just helps make the world feel even more lived in a way that other games they don't even attempt. And that's just to start. Pendragon includes chapters on armor, weapons, and even a whole appendix dedicated to randomizing a coat of arms for the character. You can lose yourself in this book and the game. There is a lot to digest, and that is a feature, not a bug. Pendragon is a 256-page, stitch-bound, hardback book with 2 book ribbons, which is always a cause for celebration, and even better, the book is printed on non-glossy paper and is bright and vibrant and wonderful, and anyone who says that artwork cannot pop on flat paper needs to spend time reading this book because it will prove them wrong. And speaking of the artwork, it's stunning. The cover art by Mark Smiley, I hope that's the way you pronounce your name, is a more standard fantasy fare. It's a wraparound piece depicting an armored knight on horseback addressing a man in colorful heraldry, probably Arthur himself by the virtue of the heraldry, and various men of arms stand in the background. It's beautiful and draws people into the game world itself. It's essentially the way the game's designed right on the cover. The interior cover pages display the same full spread piece on both the front and back cover pages, which depicts Arthur about to pull the sword from the stone. This piece has a haunting and ethereal feel to it. It's just utterly beautiful. I would love a poster of it. Interior artwork, by contrast, is a mix of more modern-looking pieces and then medieval-themed accents. The colorful medieval accents, they steal the show. The book is awash with strange hybrids and people with odd proportions and poses and just wild decorations. Flipping through this book is fun just to look at the images. If I said I adored how this book is laid out, I'd be making an understatement because, wow. The book does have a skeuomorphic design. It is made to approximate how a medieval text would be laid out. The text columns, the headers, the margins, the footers, and the gutters, they're all traced out with a lovely brown line that does not get in the way of the text. And for a layout hack like myself, seeing how the pages were laid out by the software by making all the guides part of the design itself, it makes me near giddy. It's just so cool. I loved paging through and reading this book. Drop caps are likewise, they exemplify the old tradition of an illuminated manuscript. They aren't just letters, they're pieces of art depicting animals and decorations which are molded into the letters they represent. The first 3 chapters, for example, begin with the word Pendragon, and that drop cap P is a dragon wrapped up to make that shape. I love them all so much, and if you ever get this book, spend some time looking at them. Chapter title pages, they all appear on the left page of the spread, and just like drop caps, they exemplify the old tradition of an illuminated manuscript. Each includes a piece of art in a medieval style, depicting a scene linked to the chapter title, and these pieces are then surrounded with some lovely decorations. It's a visual treat. For all its skeuomorphism, the book is not devoid of modern conventions, though. The body font is a lovely serif with good line spacing, and the first level headings are a decorative serif font, which gives the impression of being handwritten without being only semi-legible, the way that sometimes handwritten fonts can lend you to think. Heading levels utilize different colors, which is actually not a new practice, which is much more convenient in the world of modern digital printing, and callouts are all set inside a full column maroon backdrop dressed up to look like an unfurled curtain. Headers and footers in the book use the same font as the level 1 headings, with the chapter title in the header and then the page number in the footer. Both are aligned to the outside margin of the page. It's pretty cool. Tables are near perfection. Each table includes a title in maroon text above it, so you know what you're looking at. Header rows are set with black backgrounds and white text, so they pop out. And then you have alternating rows of white and gray, and that gray has just a little hint of red in it. At least I think it's red. There's a thin line between the rows and then a thick black line at the bottom of the table. It is terrific. They are so readable. I love them. Lists in the game are also well done. First level bullets are a decorative maroon cross, and then nested bullets are more the typical bullet point that we would associate with today. List items are aligned well, and there's good separation between the text and the bullets themselves, which is something that I always appreciate, and when I see it done otherwise, I notice it. The book, much like the medieval manuscripts from which it draws inspiration, the whole thing is a piece of art. This is something to marvel at. Okay, so what do I think of this game? Well, here's the thing. I think if you are into simulationist style fantasy, Pendragon should be on your short list to bring to the table. This is a game of detail, so much so that my first time reading the character creation process, I found myself sinking a little bit under the flood of information. But the more I chewed on it, the more I understood what the game's design was trying to accomplish, and the more I appreciated it. So if you pick up Pendragon, don't get discouraged with it the first time you try to read something. There's a lot to learn. It can take some time, but it's explained really well, and it can draw you into what it's trying to accomplish. I will say that for myself, I don't think I'd want to try running Pendragon because this type of simulationist RPG, it's not my cup of tea to keep track of as a GM. But if I was at a convention or if someone offered me a chance to play Pendragon for maybe a season or two, I could progress my character through some years, I'd be really interested because characters are really cool and I like the mechanics and I think it's a really neat design. And then maybe after playing a few sessions, I'd be feeling better about all the game's details and the way it's designed to embrace them. And then I'd feel a little bit more comfortable trying to run it. Because I got to tell you, this is a good game, and as I said, it's one of the most beautiful books that I own. It's really, really nice looking. The core rulebook right now can be purchased through Chaosium's website for $49.99. This also includes the PDF with purchase, which I always appreciate. The PDF alone, that sells for $24.99. And I'm intrigued enough by this game, however, that I might pick up the starter set just to get my feet wet in the system. Maybe that'll help me feel more comfortable trying to run it. That sells for $29.99, and the starter set includes a starter campaign, some pre-generated characters, and dice. Always nice. If Arthurian simulationist fantasy is something you're interested in, check this game out. Next up, I'm going to be reviewing Heroes of Cerulean, a Zelda-themed TTRPG with video game logic that I think is just a ton of fun. After that, I'll dive into Free League's Electric State RPG, which looks wonderful, and I so want to read this lovely book. And then, coming up in November, I want to try to do 4 superhero-themed videos covering Claim the Sky for Cypher System, the Superpowers Companion for Savage Worlds, the Sentinel Comics RPG, which most folks don't really know anything about, but it's been on sale on Amazon, which makes me fear for the future of it, but it's got some interesting things to it, so I'm really interested in diving in. And then finally, the Marvel Multiverse RPG that did not hook me the first time I tried to read it. I'm looking forward to trying a second go around. Supervember? No super? Who knows what I'm going to call it? It's going to be a lot of fun. But before all of that, I've got 2 live streams that are scheduled. On the 19th, I'm going to be running an Into the Odd adventure for my friends at Avenue Studios that I'm really looking forward to. It's my first time that I've written an Into the Odd adventure, and I had so much fun doing it, and I want to see how far they can get in the crawl. And then on the 22nd, over on Dave Ward's Twitch and YouTube channels, I'm going to be running a Cypher System fantasy one-shot that will be raising money for the American Red Cross, all of which will be designated to their responses to Hurricanes Helene and Milton. Links for both those streams are going to be in the description below. And until we see each other again, folks, happy playing, everyone.